Good morning, friends. I'm really delighted to have a few minutes to make a couple of points. I really want to emphasize how we're going to achieve the goals that have been set. And I'm really hoping to move. Oh, there we go. First, of course, a reminder why, very, very briefly. This past year was the hottest year on instrument record. The first 4 months of this year, everyone has set a record. We are really running out of time. Achieving the goals we've set at Paris is an extraordinarily close call. There's nothing easy about it, and we're on a path of radical overshoot still. One point I want to make is one of the reasons why to stay within the 2 C limit, and especially the well below 2 C limit, is the last time the planet was 2 C warmer than the pre-industrial was the previous interglacial period called the Eemian. And please know that in that previous interglacial period, the sea level was 6 meters higher than it is today. In other words, even the goals that we have set could be disastrously loose. I live on a low-lying, flat, small island economy called Manhattan. This really worries me. And if you live anywhere near a seacoast, and that's for most of the world's major cities, we're really up against the wall. This is NASA's projection of what would disappear with a 6-meter rise of sea level as occurred, not just as an idle idea, but as occurred during the Eemian period. You can check out your homes there, underwater. Now, the Paris Agreement calls for staying well below 2 C and pursuing efforts to limit the increase to 1.5 C. But there is very little understanding in the world of what it would take to actually accomplish this. And the most important graph to remember is the iconic figure of the representative concentration pathways of the IPCC. The top 2 lines are more or less the business as usual pathways for emissions. They would take us to somewhere from 2.5 up to 6 C. The only way to stay with a fighting chance below 2 C is the bottom pathway. And notice that that bottom pathway not only peaks within the next few years, but goes to 0. This is what is not understood in general by almost any government that I know. We have to get to 0, and not so long after the mid-century. And this RCP 2.6, which is way beyond anything in reality right now, only gives a 2/3 probability of staying below 2 C, not even staying well below 2 C, by the way, whatever that means, and no way close to the 1.5 C. So everything we're doing needs to aim for decarbonization, for getting out of the net emissions world. Many countries have announced such targets or close to them, but almost nobody has made a realistic assessment of how to do this. And the main point that I want to emphasize is that this cannot be done without significant planning. Let me say it again. In Washington, D.C., planning. That's a hated word. But it's what we absolutely need to make this work. We need long-term plans. Not some magic of the market. It will not even come close to the critical decisions that countries need to make in order to decarbonize the economy. Now, what's interesting and not really understood yet is that at Paris, a very important clause is put in, Article 4, paragraph 19. It calls on all countries to have long-term, low-emission development strategies that go out to 2050. I want to emphasize to you that without these long-term, low-emission strategies, we cannot succeed. What is in most minds and most discussion are the INDCs to 2025 or 2030. We'll get X% reduction by 2025, Y% reduction by 2030. This is not good enough. And I want to illustrate that with this picture. This is a picture of two pathways. Both of them get to an INDC of, say, 25% reduction by 2025, roughly the US INDC, which calls for 26 to 28% reduction relative to 2005. One of them goes for low-hanging fruit, meaning the easy things to do: go from coal to gas, improve mileage of internal combustion engines. But those are lock-in technologies. Those are not solutions. Those will get you 25% reduction by 2025, but they will not get you to decarbonization. They're not even on the path to decarbonization. They are a lock into another fossil fuel. The only one that can get you on the path in this illustration is the other curve that goes down to zero, and that's going not from coal to gas, but from coal to renewables, and not from current cars to better mileage current cars, but to electric vehicles or their equivalent low-emission vehicles like hydrogen fuel cells or some equivalent technology. If you plan only to 2025 or 2030, I guarantee you we will get this dreadfully wrong, even if we meet the targets. Because if we do not have the sense of where we need to go realistically, and all of the public policy choices needed to get us to the real pathway, we're gone. So I'm just here to say, I don't think we should fake it. I think we really should plan seriously for decarbonization. And that's a very different kind of exercise from the one that has been undertaken by almost all governments up until now. Now, decarbonization is feasible. It's based on three pillars: energy efficiency, decarbonizing electricity, and then basically electrifying everything you can. Vehicles, buildings, and by electrification I include hydrolysis and hydrogen loop. That's the solution. Nobody has shown an alternative to this set of pathways. Basically, electrify everything with zero carbon power. And there are many ways to do this. Dr. Jim Williams and I helped to lead a project called the Deep Decarbonization Pathways Project. 16 major emitting countries came up with pathways to 2050, all based on the same three pillars. Here's the US pathway. It shows a way essentially to decarbonize electricity. Much more nuclear, much more wind, more solar, fossil fuels with carbon capture and sequestration. It's just one of the scenarios for the US. If you don't like nuclear, take it out. Pay a higher price for the alternatives. But that's a public choice. That's not going to be solved simply by putting a price on carbon, by the way. That is a public policy choice that needs to be decided. One thing we've never looked at in my corner of the woods, and that is greatly increased hydropower from Quebec, where there's massive zero carbon power. But up until now, this has not really been on the radar screen, because the way that policy planning has been done has been with a 10 or 15-year lead time to follow the load or anticipate the load, but not to decarbonize. And I can tell you, because I sit in planning meetings all over the world, nobody has planned properly decarbonization yet of the major emitting countries. These INDCs are not strategies that are suitable yet, because they don't take us where we need to go. What are the key principles for a true pathway? First, make plans to 2050. Plans. These are indicative plans. They're not central plans, but they are absolutely plans. And they look at the energy alternatives. Second, plan for a long-term process that's going to be continued no matter which government is in power. We need institutions that take this out of the 2 to 4 year political cycle, because this is a 40-year transformation if we care to succeed. This is not normal politics. This is long-term systems transformation at the heart of the world economy. Third, choose your low-carbon technologies. Renewables, hydropower, nuclear, CCS, you're not allowed to say none of the above. Many environmentalists say we want clean energy, but we hate nuclear, we don't like CCS, we don't want windmills outside of our summer homes, and we don't like power lines, and we don't like hydropower. That's not green, that's faking it. You need to choose off the menu. I believe we need all of these. And when you take something off the menu, the others are more expensive. This is a systems analysis. Don't think that the carbon price is going to solve these problems. Use regulation as well as pricing. I'm a market economist. Let me tell you, the market is not magic enough to make this transformation. No matter how many times you hear it, you need to make public policy choices. President Obama has said essentially no more coal plants without CCS. Absolutely correct. We also need to say no more internal combustion engines after 2030 because they don't fit a 2°C scenario. These are choices, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a market process. And then we tell countries, privatize your power sector, then try to rein them in with pricing. This is not sensible. Just don't build more coal-fired power plants, please, because then we blow the budget, the carbon budget, that is. So we need to phase out all coal without CCS. That's going to be almost all coal. We need to strand all high-cost hydrocarbons. The news today that about 270 billion of projects of ultra-deep sea drilling and so forth, Arctic, have been canceled is wonderful news. Our job is to make sure it doesn't start again. We don't need those hydrocarbons. We have far more proved reserves than we could ever safely burn. Go cross-border. This is not energy nationalism. At least the United States and Canada should cooperate, huh? At least the European Union should have a true energy plan, not 28 separate national plans. That requires thinking about transmission. Renewable energy needs to be shipped the same way as fossil fuel energy, but it just is shipped on transmission grids or as synthetic liquids, but it needs a systems approach that is transnational. And finally, we're going to need a lot of specialized climate financing. Let me finally mention that I am thrilled that the government of Morocco, we're one of the partners together with WBCSD and ICLEI, will have, alongside the formal negotiations this time, the first ever meeting of engineers. Thank you. This is an engineering problem to a huge extent. Not a problem only for lawyers and diplomats. I love diplomats, by the way. They know how to talk to each other without shooting each other. It's a brilliant field. But we need engineers, and we're going to get engineers from every one of the signatories together to talk about real, practical timelines and pathways. And the beauty of this solutions conference is no outcome document and no negotiations. It's just geeky brainstorming. So if you're interested, please let me know. I believe it's crucially important. Thank you very much.